Okay, get this. What if I told you there was a way for the lowest paid workers in the country to get a nearly 30% pay rise without their bosses having to pay a single extra cent? I know, it sounds impossible, right? Kind of like an economic magic trick. Well, today we're looking at a fascinating policy proposal that claims to do just that. It's an idea that really challenges how we think about work and pay, so let's dig in and see how it's all supposed to work.
And this is the big question, isn't it? The one that sounds almost too good to be true. An extra $12,000 a year? I mean, that's life-changing money for someone on minimum wage. That could be the difference between just scraping by and actually having some breathing room. So how on earth is this possible without an employer's costs going up? Well, to figure that out, we've got to start by looking at what a minimum wage paycheck actually looks like right now.
So to really understand this solution, we first need to get a super clear picture of the problem it's trying to solve. Let's take a look at the financial reality for a full-time worker on Australia's national minimum wage.
Here it is. This is the starting point. If you're working a full-time 38-hour week on the national minimum wage, this is your gross annual salary, $49,296. Now that's the headline number, right? It's the total amount an employer pays in wages before anyone else gets a piece of it.
But, and this is a really big but, that headline number is not what a worker actually gets to take home. The source material for this idea has a name for the gap between what an employer pays out and what an employee can actually spend. They call it the cash wedge. Think of it as everything that gets sliced away before the money even hits your bank account.
And whoa, this breakdown really shows you just how big that wedge is. From that gross pay of almost 50 grand, look at that. Over $6,500 just gets eaten up by income tax and the Medicare levy. That leaves just over $42,000 in actual spendable cash. That is a huge chunk taken out of your day-to-day budget.
All right, so that's the problem. It's a pretty big squeeze. Now let's get into the proposed solution that's designed to fix this exact issue, and honestly, you might be surprised by how simple it is.
The whole policy really just hinges on two core mechanics working together. First up, make the minimum wage tax-free. That means no income tax and no Medicare levy on those earnings. And second, by default, redirect that compulsory superannuation contribution, the mandatory retirement savings, and put it directly into a worker's cash wages. So, this right here, this is the absolute key to that whole no extra cost claim. The superannuation money isn't a new cost for a business. They are already legally required to pay it. This policy doesn't add a single thing to their bill, it just changes the destination of that money from a fund you can't touch for decades to cash in your hand, right now.
Okay, so what does this all actually mean for a worker's paycheck? Let's look at the numbers when you put these two changes together, because the difference is, well, it's staggering. The before and after here is it's night and day. As we saw, a worker is currently taking home about $42,700. Under this proposal, with zero tax and their super paid as cash, their take-home pay would jump to over $55,000. That is an enormous difference in spending power.
Let's just put a fine point on that. We're talking about an extra $12,478 of spendable cash every single year. I mean, just imagine what that means for covering rent, for buying groceries, or dealing with an unexpected bill. It's huge.
In percentage terms, that adds up to a massive 29.2% increase in cash in hand, and it's all achieved without the employer's total labor costs going up by a single cent. It's pretty incredible when you see it laid out like that.
And this quote from the source paper really gets to the why behind all this. It's not just about a pay rise for the sake of it. It's about providing immediate financial relief, or liquidity as they call it, for the households where every single dollar has to go towards those essential, non-negotiable living costs.
Now look, a proposal this radical is obviously going to raise some big questions. So let's tackle the most obvious ones head on.
This is the big one, right? Probably the first thing that popped into your head. If you redirect super into cash wages, aren't you just solving today's problem by creating a much bigger one for people down the track when they retire?
Well, the response laid out in the proposal is that it all comes down to choice. Cash would become the new default, but any worker could easily opt in to have the money keep going into their super fund. The key point here is that it removes forced saving for people who are struggling to make ends meet right now. The argument is basically, you can't properly plan for the long term if you can't even survive the short term.
Okay, fair question number 2. If you suddenly inject an extra 12 grand a year into the pockets of the lowest paid workers, won't that just drive up prices for everyone and cancel out the whole benefit?
The argument here is that the usual inflation risk is much lower.
See, because employers' labor costs aren't actually increasing, there's no direct pressure on them to raise prices. The extra cash is coming from a tax cut and from redirecting savings that are already in the system. The proposal does acknowledge some risk, sure, but it argues it can be managed, especially if you also have policies to make sure there are enough essential goods to meet the new demand.
So, when you strip everything else away, this whole proposal really forces us to confront a pretty fundamental choice about our economic priorities.
And this slide puts that choice in perfect contrast. On one side, you have immediate solvency, which is just about giving people the cash they've earned today to cover the rent, the food, the bills. And on the other side, you have forced saving, locking that same cash away for a retirement that could be decades in the future.
And that's the core question this idea leaves us with. For someone working a full-time job but still finding it hard to pay the bills, which is more important? Mandating that they save for a distant future, or giving them the resources to be financially secure right now? It's a debate that really goes to the very heart of what making work pay actually means.